At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only i3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
It is a new day for 911 professionals. They have gone from the most important person you will never see to the most vital piece of public safety. Truth be told, they always have been. The curtain has been pulled back, and they are sharing their stories. Welcome to Imagine Listening. Your worst day is our everyday, by Ricardo Martinez II, and narrated by myself, Ricardo Martinez II, and distributed by Beacon Audio Books, copyright 2023. That's right, everyone. Finally, I can let everyone know the rumors are true. Imagine Listening, Your Worst Day is Our Everyday is now available as an audiobook on Audible, and it's a long time coming. Very excited. Not a lot of authors get the opportunity to voice their own book, but I had the honor and privilege to do so. So thank you to Beacon Audio Books, as well as my publisher, Titled Town Publishing, for everything, but especially all of you for making the I Am 911 movement, as well as Imagine Listening, what it is today. I appreciate you all more than you know. So go ahead, head out, stream it, download it, however you consume your audiobooks. Imagine Listening is now available. How often has a caller given you a description of a situation that turned out to be completely incorrect? How about a description of a suspicious individual that had only vague details? Or a fire that was supposed to be the next big wildfire, but turned out to just be a campfire for some s'mores? To help these moments become a thing of the past, you need Prepared Assist. Prepared Assist gives you the ability to receive live video and picture directly from the caller in real time. You can see that the situation they described as a big fight is just two people yelling. You can see that the suspicious individual they described as a short female with a red t-shirt is actually a male with a green sweatshirt. You can see exactly how bad the fire is and help prepare the engines en route with a better size up than ever before. And if you don't like the video that's coming in, you can blur it at any time, even before the live stream starts. And it can still be stored for use in after action and past the field responders. Sometimes you won't need live video at all, like when a person is reported missing. Instead of waiting for the officer to get to the scene to collect a picture, you can get one from the caller instantly, saving crucial time at the start of the search. Prepared Assist is built to give you situational clarity so that you can get to the truth of the call faster than ever before. Visit prepared911.com/assist to learn more and see the platform in action. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo of the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast, whether you're on Circle, Facebook, or Patreon. Thank you all so very much for everything, but especially all of you who are watching, listening, sharing, and supporting. I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it wasn't for all of you, but also everything that I do wouldn't be what it is without you, because we're sharing your stories, and you have made this the amazing podcast that it is. So thank you, all of you, for sharing your stories, for coming on, being a guest, and doing what you do for our profession of 911. Thank you. Also, a big shout out to Prepared for being a social media plus sponsor for the month of March. Make sure to listen to the information at the beginning and of course at the end of the episode to learn more about Prepared, and also look out for a lot of cool content that we're going to be doing together so that you can learn more about the company and what it is that they do, but more so, why they do it. I'll say this really quick. Josh, the marketing lead for Prepared, was on the podcast, actually was on Open Mic Live with me just this past Sunday. And he was on there, not just talking about the company and what they do or why they do it, but also their praise for all of you and for what you do. But also, a few of them, including Josh, ended up coming into one of my Imagine listening sessions, and they wanted to get in there because they're not only a big supporter of what I do, but they wanted to learn more about dispatch and hear those stories and really get dialed in to this profession, but also what it is like to be you and what it is that you do so that they can mold their services around what dispatch does. So make sure to check out all their stuff, send them some love, and let them know that Within the Trenches podcast sent you, because love sent to them is love sent to us. And I wouldn't be able to do this stuff without sponsorships from folks like Prepared, or especially in digital, who's been with me since the beginning. So thank you all for that. And there's a lot of good things coming up, a lot of classes and conferences, and so much more. So make sure to check out or look for all of those as things are going to be coming up. The next place I'm going to be at is the Navigator Conference that the IAED puts on. This is going to be in DC, and I'm going to be in booth 215, and I'll be doing an Imagine listening session out there as well. So make sure to check me out, and I look forward to seeing all of you. All right. Now that I have all of that out of the way, I am very excited for my guest today. And I'll say this really quick, that part of the sign up had on there, like, basically referencing their manager who had spoke to them and was like, you need to do this. So they're on, and I am so happy to not only have my guest Katherine on today, who's a 911 professional with Ada County Sheriff's Office out of Idaho, but also for her manager, who is my assistant producer as well, and that is Dawn Shumway, DDPQ. So without further ado, here is Katherine. Hello.
Hi.
I am excited to have you on here. And like I said just a moment ago, when when I saw the sign up and you had that on there, it made me laugh, because I could just see Dawn coming up to you and being like, you really should do this. You've got an amazing story, and just going on and on and on. And here we are.
Yes.
So again, I'm excited to have you on, and you're just a few weeks short of about 16 years in public safety, right?
Yeah, dispatching for 16, and I've been a supervisor for just about the last 2.
Oh man. So an excellent and longer career and everything, which is good. Congratulations that you're going on those 16. And let's go back in time. Let's figure out how you started your journey. Do you come from a family of public safety, or do you jump in green?
So I grew up watching Rescue 911 as a kid.
Yes.
So I loved the drama and the emergencies and the phone calls before I even knew why. And then when I was about 24, I was a newly single mom of 2, and I moved back to Idaho. And my brother here is a paramedic supervisor now. And he said, hey, for fun, you should go sit in with dispatch. And the first time I ever walked into a dispatch center was on the 4th of July.
Oh, dude.
I was hooked on day one.
Oh, well,
So,
then that's good.
yeah.
That is very good, and, it's a good outcome because you're going on 16 years now. So you end up going over there. Your brother is in public safety and everything. Was there any time in between, like, like a day or two or whichever of him from when he told you you should go and do, a sit along or whichever, and then going in there, was there time for you 2 to talk, for him to explain, certain things, or were you already just kinda good to go because of the fact that you had Rescue 911 as a reference? And I say that too because that too was my favorite show growing up,
Mhm.
and I loved it.
Yeah. I knew very little.
Mhm.
And I think he was more worried about helping me find a safe apartment to move into or what area was, safer for us to move into. And he just said, "You'll love it and you'll be great at it." And so I just went with that. And I didn't know much the first time I walked in.
So, do you remember walking in that first day? Like, just so that people who are watching and listening, what is it that you're seeing? You walk in and are there multiple people there? Is there screens all over the place? Like, what was it that you were seeing? And I guess what were you kind of feeling at that time?
Yeah. So they walked me down into a basement, which was kind of dark, and
Mhm.
then into the dispatch center, which they also kept dark. And then you just have all the phones ringing constantly, and there's a bunch of people talking. Some are talking loud, some are whispering, some are talking in a soothing tone, some are more direct, and I couldn't take it all in, and I'm like, I don't even know where to look or focus first. And even sitting with them for several hours, my thought leaving was, holy crap, how do they focus?
Yeah, I can just imagine, and for a lot of people who are watching and listening to this who have never walked into an emergency communication center before, it's like that. I've heard a lot of people, especially in the Citizens Academy, for example, they walk in and they'll say something to the effect of, "This is like NASA." You've got all these screens all over the place, all these people and everything, and you're just hearing things, hearing things, hearing things. And for you, kind of the same. How many hours did you stay? Did you stay like a whole shift, or how long were you there?
I stayed 6, and since it was the 4th of July, they booted me as it was getting crazy because they didn't have time to explain much,
Yeah.
and so at one point, she's retired now, but she said, "You see now get out," so I could do my job because trying to explain things to me while taking nonstop calls was on the 4th of July. And I said, "Okay, I'll see you again because 'cause I'm in. Sign me up."
Damn. So from that time that you literally, right, love at first sight, right, so to speak, you're in there and you're hearing these things, you're seeing these things, and you want to jump in already. And that's a good way to, have your introduction to 911 as well, because there's a lot of people, especially when I was in dispatch, that would come in and they would sit with us and nothing
Mhm.
would happen. And some of them would return, others would just be like, maybe this isn't for me. But you right away, and also because 4th of July and stuff. So that's awesome. And so from that time till signing up, how long did it take to go through the interview process and background and all of that?
Because I was coming from out of state, it took about so I did my first sit-in 4th of July. My hire date is April of the next year. So it was quite extensive. At one point, I did have to extend it out 2 months just because of moving.
Mhm.
So, but it still took almost a year.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's definitely a process then. So, just kind of thinking back to that process and everything, what were some of the things that you needed to do? Was there a psych test? Was there a typing test? Like, what were some of those things that you were doing in the beginning, before you end up getting the job almost a year later?
So our testing at the time, there was a timed um, typing test, which I had to retake because I wasn't good on computers.
Mhm.
So that took me a minute. And then there was a spelling test, which I know I'm not a great speller. So that one was hard. But the most uncomfortable part, I would have to say, was having a polygraph done.
Oh, yeah.
That's coming in. They didn't do any drug testing. We didn't have a psych test, but the polygraph for someone who's never been involved in law enforcement, that's new. And it was scary.
Yeah, I can't imagine that because, I've seen it being done, right? I've seen it done before. You can find videos on YouTube or, I mean, just on TV or whatever, and every time I see it, I think, I feel like just because sometimes anybody gets nervous or whatever, like, anything that you would answer, it would be like a picture that's just the color purple or whatever,
Mhm.
and they would say, "Is it blue?" And you're like, "Yes." "Wait, what?" Like like, you could screw yourself up, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I can imagine how, nerve-wracking it could be, and then, going through the rest of the process and stuff, so then, you've gone through that. It's now almost a year later and everything, and you end up getting the phone call or whichever saying that you got the job.
Mhm.
How did that feel?
It was exciting. I was nervous, but I
Mhm.
was very excited. Shift work, of course, made me nervous having two brand new babies. So that was a little bit of a stressor, but the team helped out and, family, and we were able to get through it.
Awesome. So when you get in there and you start your training, was there anything that surprised you, or was it kind of how you thought it was gonna be? Because, you've got the reference point of Rescue 911, and, like, for me too, thinking about it, that show was really good, right? But at the end, almost every time at the end, dispatch got to meet the people that they were talking to, and that's not always the case. I mean, that's not reality, right? It does happen sometimes, but that's not always the reality. So, for you, when you first start getting in there, when you first start training and everything, was there anything that surprised you?
Yeah, a lot of the surprise came from it wasn't scripted. So we didn't have where we went through, EMD and EFD. It was all we just wing it.
Mhm.
And then there wasn't a classroom portion for me at the time. So I had just stuck with the trainer on a console. And day 2 or 3, they're like, all right, go ahead and answer. And I was like, what? I and they're like, you'll be fine. And I'm like, this is real people's emergencies, and like, you want me to handle it? So that was, that was shocking
Yeah.
for sure.
Uh, I I can relate with you, and I say that because when I first started dispatching, it was my first night in,
Mhm.
and I watched my trainer take an 911 call, and afterwards, he turned around and looked at me, and he said, "Alright, you're next." And I thought he was joking, but he was for real.
Mhm.
Luckily, that first phone call was just it was a butt dial. So, but I had been sitting there for a while, nervous, kind of freaking out, and sweating a lot because it's 911. You don't know what's going to come in. Anything
Mhm.
can happen in 911. So I relate with you where, 3 days in or whichever, you're now they're like, "All right, you're next." And you're like, "Oh God, how does this gonna go?"
Yeah.
So you end up you end up going through this. How long did the training last?
I think mine was about 4, 5 months.
Mhm.
So it wasn't very long because we were only doing law enforcement at the time. We weren't doing medical for the new people.
Ah, okay. So you're taking 911 calls, but you're taking 911 calls for law enforcement. So were medicals being taken there, or
Yep. We
um
yell out
do
medical,
all of them?
and someone else would pick it up who was trained in it, and they would handle it.
So while you're sitting with your trainer or whichever, I'm guessing you are on the umbilical cord?
Hmm.
And for those who are watching and listening, I mean, this is episode 500 something or 600 something, whichever it is. So hopefully people know by now when I say the umbilical cord, it's the wire that's connected between the trainer and the trainee. And there's a little switch to switch it to either mute or unmute so that if the trainer needs to jump in, they can jump in. But a lot of times it's like, it's all you.
Yeah.
You're
Yes.
doing it.
Connected by our little 4 foot leash is what I called it. Yeah.
So with everything that you were doing, and starting to get into training and stuff. Do you remember do you remember your first call or any of those early calls that came in?
I remember my first crisis caller because I didn't know it was a crisis call, but everyone else in the room did, and we were
Mhm.
familiar with her, so they all kind of watched me to see how I handled it. So I remember that one very clearly. But more than that, I remember being curious. So even on basic calls, I would, I want to know everything they stole. I want to know exactly how they got in. I would ask all the questions to try and get the full picture. And my trainers would always get mad at me and they're like, no, just let them go. Like, we don't have time for this. But that curiosity, it was hard to hang up without knowing.
Mhm.
And that's what I think I remember more than specific calls.
I can agree there that, a lot of those calls in the beginning, especially because when you're training, you want to do the best job. I mean, you wanna do the best job all the time. It's not just when you're training, but especially when you're training because you're with someone who has been doing, has been in dispatch forever, or at least a lot longer than you have, right? And you want to, not so much please that person, but you just want to do a good job. And when I think back on some of the earlier times in dispatch, when I first got onto law enforcement radios, that main law enforcement channel, there were some times when I would go to respond or an officer would say something, and my response would should have been just simply a 10-4. And I would look at my trainer and I would say, "It's just 10-4, right? Like, there's nothing else I need to say?" And they would just kinda look at me and I would go, "Okay." And then 10-4, and then unkey, and they would go, "Why?" And and I would say, "Because I'm in training and I wanna make sure that I'm doing it right or saying it right and saying exactly what I'm supposed to be saying. I
Hmm.
don't wanna mess up." And they said, "Look, you're going to mess up. It's going to happen, but that's how you are going to learn.
Hmm.
Also, if you say something that's maybe slightly wrong or something like that, the officers are gonna let you know, and
Yep.
they won't let you live it down." And I was like, "That's what I'm trying to not do, damn it." But you get so much into what it is that you're doing that sometimes it can hinder you in a way. Did you ever feel like there were times kind of like that where you were doing so much or you wanted to do so much that maybe it didn't completely hinder you, but kind of like how your trainers were saying, "Just let them go. We don't have time. You have to keep going."
Hmm. No, I would try and fake it,
Mhm.
and I would say some stupid things on the radio, and I would get laughed at or mic clicked or quite often at
Yeah.
first because I wanted to prove to my trainer, "Hey, I got this," and I would just go. And then they're like, "Oh, geez."
See,
They
but, that's pretty cool, though. I like
Mhm,
that because you were already kind of thinking outside the box.
mhm,
You were doing a little bit more, but also, as you were saying, it was helping you to be able to learn not not just everything that you were doing, but also getting that information for your own what I kind of feel like you're saying is your own mental health and wellness in a sense.
yes.
Because those who've been watching and listening to this podcast for years, because we've said it many times and I've said it many times and I will always say it. One of the big things that 911 professionals deal with is not having that closure. So I can see where
Mhm,
you asking so many questions to get as much information as possible helps everyone as a whole, but specifically and a little more importantly for you as well, for your
mhm.
own mental health and wellness so that you have that.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like opening a book to the main scene, and you jump straight in at the action, and then you have to close it right before there's any kind of finality to it. You don't know what happened in the fight scene. You don't know what happened in the big love scene. And you're just like, "Oh, well, moving on." And so it's always hard because our brain at first paints its picture of what we think it should be. And a lot of times that's really wrong. And so it's for me, that was the hard part.
And And that is exactly where, I was going with that as well because and especially because, there are there's video to 911, right? So now you have the option to be able to see, a lot of these things that are happening, that are coming in. But in a way, we still kind of see it because of, kind of how you said it as well. You're hearing everything that's going on, and sometimes when it's an open line, you're really hearing what
Mhm.
is going on. Because that person might not be there, or maybe they're just breathing because they're hiding or something, and you're listening to the environment of that phone call to piece together exactly what is going on in your head. So you're in a way seeing certain things, but like you said, sometimes it's worse than what it actually is.
Mhm.
So you had mentioned that do you do training as well?
I was a trainer for 10 years.
Mhm.
So not currently, but I'm a like a post instructor, so I do like our quarterly trainings or I do some trainings for our center.
So the reason I ask as well is because a lot of the people that I've had on who ended up becoming trainers for a period of time and now are doing other things or whichever, it's one of two reasons. One reason is because they had kind of crap training and they want to move into that role so that they can mold, and help the newer folks that are coming in so that they don't have to deal with what they dealt with, or they had excellent training, an excellent trainer, or whichever, and they wanted to continue that cycle versus the other. So which one was it for you?
So I had a trainer that made me cry a couple times. So she wasn't great, but I was quickly moved away from her. My other
Mhm,
trainers were great,
mhm,
but I think the main reason that I wanted to train is because how I wanted to learn and how I learned wasn't a big point of how we were taught.
mhm,
Because I wanna know the why. If you can explain to me why we do something a certain way and then how we do it and then the benefit of that, like, it makes sense to me and I can go through with that. So I always liked training, like, final phases or where they're close to getting out, and then I would explain the background, the why, if you look at it this way versus this way, kind of like the polisher, and I would try and close those gaps for people, and so I hadn't had a trainer that had done that, and so I liked being able to answer questions and dive into things and figure out the reasoning of why.
I love that.
Mhm.
And then, you've got these folks that are new and they're coming in and they're learning things and you're teaching them all of these different things that or even stuff that you learn together because a lot of
Mhm.
times trainers kind of learn from their trainees too on different things. But here's the question. What was the satisfaction like? Because there's those moments, right, when you're teaching someone and you see it in their face, like you can feel it from them, their energy where they've got it. And you're there just kind of watching them like, "Aw."
The light bulb moment
Right.
where everything keys into them and they're like, "Oh, I got this." I love that feeling. It's always a day to celebrate, or especially when they think of something that
Mhm.
I hadn't thought of and they're like, "Ha!" And it's like such a proud moment. You're like, "Oh, I loved it."
Those are some of the best moments, and, for you, this was a question that I wanted to ask you a little bit earlier, but just to ask you now. How long do you think it took you to feel like you were dialed in? Like for myself, I would say it was like 2.5, maybe 3 years where I felt like I was fully dialed in. I of course, I knew what I was doing. I was off training and I was confident in everything else, but there's a point, right, where you feel like you're just fully dialed in and you're just going, and you're just going.
I would say about 2 years, and that's about the time they stuck the EMD packet on my desk and said, "You're now taking medical calls." And then I went way backwards. And then I was like,
Oh.
starting over. Um, and then I'd still say today I'm not completely dialed in just because
Mhm.
everything changes so fast that as
That's
soon as
true.
I learn something we have a new program coming out or something next, or, adding a new location services. It's so I don't always feel 100% dialed in, but I would say be comfortable probably about 2 years.
Perfect. Yeah, there's things changing all the time. So
Mhm.
there's always stuff to learn, right? And I think that's why this profession is a career that is just so good. I mean, there's of course there's a lot of bad, right? That is in 911 because you're answering calls during someone's could be their nightmare, right?
Mhm.
And you're going through all of that. Some of those things stick with you and the trauma that comes from it and everything, but there's a lot of good in this profession, in this career, and there's a lot of rewarding moments. And so before we get to actually, you know what? No, we'll go ahead and jump right into this one. But after this, I want to know about some of those more rewarding moments as well. But as we were talking earlier, um, and one of the things that I ask a lot of the folks that come on as well is, and as long as you feel comfortable, like I say to everybody else, what is one of the calls that just it kind of sticks with you?
I was a couple years out of training and I took a call from a man reporting his stepson missing. And so I sent on just a basic missing child. And then more officers started showing up, more officers started showing up. And it turns out that he had been torturing him and killed him. And then it took about 2 weeks before we found him, that they were doing the press conferences and he was begging, if you know where my son is, please send him home. And so that call was one that still gets me to this day, and that happened 15, 14 years ago. So a very long time.
Wow. Okay, so the you take the call and
Mhm.
everything, all of this stuff is going on. And so it's eventually is when it comes out that he actually did this. Well, prior to that, it was like a missing child case and everything, and, ever is were there people looking and all the other stuff that you would, normally see, in the news or whichever, all of this was going on about and you said how much time was it from the missing, from the original call
Mhm.
to when you guys ended up finding out ultimately that it was the dad's fault?
So it was 2 weeks until we were
Mhm.
able to find his till his body was recovered. And so I know there was some suspicion coming up to that or building up to that, but they weren't able to prove anything until once he was located. Then we were able to get it solved pretty quick. But I remember exactly where I was sitting, exactly what desk I was sitting at. And I remember as officers started showing up, they had canines coming to sniff trunks because it was an apartment complex. They started doing, before I left, they started calling out more detectives. And you just have that feeling in your gut. You just know. And so I went home and I came back in the next day, and there was about 20 officers assigned to my same call. And at that time I just knew. You just it's pretty bad.
So, for those who are watching and listening right now, a quick warning. We're going to listen to a snippet of the audio of this call, and then we will be right back here in just one moment.
Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll send him out. Where do you want me to have him meet you at your apartment?
I'm walking around the apartment complex trying to find him, and I can't find him nowhere.
Oh. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, sir. I'm going to have a bunch of officers come your way to help find your son. I'm going to have them call your cell phone. Is your cell phone?
Yes.
Okay, I'll have them call your cell phone when they're close by so they can meet up with you, okay?
All right, thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
So that was the audio from there was just a snippet that was played. Now, you and I were talking earlier and all, and so this snippet was even played on on a broadcast, right? This was on the news and everything else.
Mhm.
It's something that obviously, as you were saying, sticks with you. This is about 14 years ago, whichever, and it still is there in a sense. But during that time when this was being played, on the news or different programs or whichever, how were you? Like, where were you at, kind of during that time, in the sense of your mental health and wellness? Because I can't even imagine, you know, taking that phone call, right, and hearing all of this, and the dad kind of crying as this stuff is going, and then ultimately to find out that it was actually his fault and what it was that happened. What was that like for you?
It was hard. So he was 8, the kid was 8, and I had an 8-year-old daughter at home. And so I was terrified of everybody. I wouldn't let my kids go check the mail without me watching. I wouldn't let people babysit them or watch them that I didn't fully know and trust, which is smart anyways, but like I was even more worried about it, don't open the door to strange. Like I was hyper vigilant and I was very protective of them. And then all my other missing kid calls I took, it triggered something that I thought, oh, well, they're probably dead. And so I just immediately went worst case scenario on those calls, even though it was, hey, they got off at the wrong bus stop. My brain is thinking, oh, call everybody out, in case the kid's dead or what, it went worst case for a long time.
Yeah. So, and along with that, you've got this going on, and in the news, and just the continuations of that, because it doesn't just stop there, especially when it's something like this. It just continues and continues, and like we are saying, you're having to basically re-experience this all over again, and over and over. So, a couple things here. First off, how did that work with friends and family? Because and the reason I ask too is because, and this is no comparison to what you dealt with, but just on general calls, people, friends and family would ask me. They would say, "So really happened on that call?" Or, "What was your part in it?" Or whichever. And I would say, I mean, what you saw on the news is what's there. There's some extra stuff, but I'm not really gonna talk about it. Maybe I'll talk to you guys about it some other time, but there's other things that are going on, and I would just kinda skate by a little bit until I was ready to talk about it.
Mhm.
So, for you, what was that like for you in that sense?
Um, it was it was hard, and I was lucky because my family, we work in the gamut of it. So I'm dispatch, my brother's a paramedic, my sister worked at the courthouse, my now husband is an officer.
Mhm.
So we kind of had the whole follow up. My brother works out at the prison, and so we were able to like understand each other's jobs and to be able to talk to each other, um, with knowing those boundaries of what we can and can't discuss. It was hard though when they started putting my call and the trial went on national TV, because I would have people from high school reach out, and I would have media reach out and want to do questions or interviews outside of the courtroom. So that was weird. And then people would call in and critique my call into the dispatch center, which is also weird, but it it was a lot. I didn't watch the news for a long time. I stopped watching the news. I stopped reading articles. I just kind of shut everyone out.
Oh, geez. And I was just gonna ask, what was that part like for you, in just even to, I guess, decompress? What were some of the things that you were doing to decompress? But on top of that, you obviously have a good support system with your
Mhm.
family, but with the center, I mean, was there a debriefing or anything like that? And that was the second part that I was going to ask, was the support system piece of that, which you explained beautifully with, with your family and such. But what about at the ECC, at the center? Were there debriefings? Were you part of those? And how did that work?
So there was not at the time, but I did get when a deputy found him and recovered his body. he called me directly because it was my day off.
Mhm.
And I remember where I was sitting, exactly what I was doing when I got that phone call. And all he said is, "We have him. We found him." And the deputy was upset. So I knew, but he said, "We have him. We'll get our answers." And
Wow.
that meant the world to me. And so then everything re-sparked back up, and then it's round two. Then we go to trial, and then I'm sitting across from this man who murdered an 8-year-old kid, and I'm looking him in the eye as they're playing the audio, and it was a lot. Because going from listening to him on the phone to looking him in the eyes, that's a whole different thing that we're not trained for.
Right. Yes. And if you don't mind me asking, because I don't ever want anyone to relive anything that they don't want to relive, but just kind of thinking about you being in court, did
Mhm.
you were you on the stand? And they asked you these questions like, is this your voice? You have to say certain things like that. And then if you are on the stand, like you were saying, you've got a visual of this person now who all of this is how it happened.
Yeah, I was in court. They had me testify a few different days. And this was kind of a big deal because it did make national news. So we had national news cameras in there recording as well. So not only was my call played on national news, but then my court footage from the testimony was played. And it it was a lot. And then I had to maintain my poker professional face on the stand while looking at this guy, and then knowing, from I didn't know all the details, but a lot of the details of what he did to this kid, and not being able to look at him in just pure disgust. So,
Uh, I I have to hand it to you because I don't know how I would have been able to handle that. I mean, I say that like I probably would have been, just like you, that
mm,
poker face, just professional, just doing what you got to do, and on the inside, you know, beating his ass,
yeah,
in
yeah,
the inside, in your mind,
yeah,
having whatever thoughts and stuff. But damn, I can't. It's hard to imagine, going through all of that, and then, you get through that court case, and well, here's a question: were you present for a lot of those days that the trial was going on, and were you there when the verdict came out?
no, no, I was not. They didn't want me to be in there, just because walking in and out, the media kept trying to grab me, or be like, "Hey, can you tell us about this?" And so they just asked me to stay away. Plus, I didn't want to be there anyway. I wanted to be far from that. Um, Relief, definitely that he was found guilty. But a murder trial for a kid lasts so long,
Mhm.
and they were trying him at the same time that they were trying his biological mom, because she was privy to it and knew what was going on about the torture and stuff. Um, and so both trials going on at the same time, or back to back, it was years before that got like wrapped up, sealed, and done.
Jeez.
Hmm.
So we're okay. So were you in there for mom's trial as well? Like, did they play, the tape all over again, or was that only for the dad's part in it?
Only for the stepdads.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, damn, you're
Yeah.
like really reliving everything if they're pulling you in for both. I mean, I can understand why they would, but the main portion of that, of course, is the person, the stepdad who actually, did all of this. But the fact that she knew, like, as that had to have been hard for you, especially having a child around the same age and being a mom and going through all of that, whatever the circumstance was. I just mean that as a parent, it's just got to be hard in general with this, because when we're taking these phone calls, um as I've said before, and I've said many times, you're taking phone calls from people who are living their literal nightmare.
Mm.
But then to be taking a phone call from someone who is saying something and it turns out they're the ones who actually did it. I mean, the feeling from that as well,
Mhm.
and whatever goes on in your head after that is it has to be just basically mind blowing.
Yeah, and then you hear so when you listen to the audio, you'll hear him kind of cry in a way, and then it makes you question, like everything you're hearing. Like he sounded scared and sad that he couldn't find a son. It turns out we know why,
Mhm.
but hearing that, I believed him. And that's part of the reason they took that call was because I said, "Hey, we're going to send people to help you. Like I got you." And then to know that he was lying, it makes you question everything after that.
Right. Yeah. And, that's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you too, that I'm just going to go ahead and ask you now is kind of, and you kind of answered this already a little bit, but I was going to ask, how has this profession kind of changed you in a way? And I feel like that goes really hand in hand in what you said earlier, that after taking this call, like you didn't trust your kids to go do certain things. And people might hear that and think, what, why? But here's the thing, when you're taking phone calls like this, you are in protect mode a lot,
Mhm.
right? Whether it be mama bear, papa bear mode, you are in that mode, and that's how it is. Were there any other ways that you kind of feel like, you know, not just the profession, but also that call kind of changed, you or just kind of how you think about certain things?
I think it hardened me. Dispatchers have dark souls anyway,
Yeah.
or dark humor, dark souls.
Yeah.
But it made me realize that my problems or what I'm thinking is a terrible thing that's going on is nothing. Like people have, and I'm not discrediting people's emergencies. Everyone's
Mhm.
emergencies are different. But for
Right.
my problems, I was like, oh, I have all this stuff going on. And then I get to work and you take a call and you're like, all right, my life's easy. Like I have it easy. So it kind of hardens you a little bit. Um, and also it puts you even like calling an ambulance for my daughter when she needed it.
Mhm.
She went into seizures and wasn't breathing, and I went through the 911 call. I did my own priority dispatch. I told them what the code should be. I answered all the questions before they even asked them, and then I hung up. And then as soon as that first responder walked in, I lost it because I was first in dispatcher mode, and then when help got there, I was in mom mode, and I lost it. So it hardens you, I think, a little bit.
It definitely does. There's a lot that, that ends up switching up because I've been out of dispatch for this July. This coming July 2024 will be 11 years that I've been out of dispatch. Been in public safety over 22 years now
Mhm.
total, but I dispatched for 13 years, and then I've been out of dispatch for going on 11 years now. And there's been a couple times where we're doing kind of a dinner and a movie type thing, right? We're sitting in the living room, and this one time specifically, my youngest daughter had been running around and playing around and stuff, and she goes, "Oh, I need a fork," and then she goes to run for it, and I said, "You need to make sure to walk back with that fork." And she's like, "Okay," and I've told my kids before, I took a phone call once where there was a kid who was running, who was playing around and was holding onto a fork and ended up falling, and it got, lodged in the roof of this kid's mouth. The kid ended up ultimately being okay, but because of that, I end up telling my kids like, "No, don't
Mhm.
do that," or don't, or whatever. And I've had even like, family or friends or whichever say, "Dude, you're so protective." I was like, "I'm really
Yeah.
not that protective, but let me tell you a story." And then afterwards, they're just kind of staring at me, and they're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay, I understand why now."
Yeah, my kids definitely take the brunt of the job. Now they're all in high school. I have 3
Mhm.
girls in high school. And so after taking calls of a suspicious guy at Target, my daughter's like, "Hey, can I run to Target?" And I'm like, "Whoa, time out.
Right.
Park in the front, call me as you're walking in. Don't let anyone follow you." And then yeah, so they unfortunately get the brunt of it, but
Man, yeah, and, it happens. It
Mhm.
happens. There's a lot of things that happen with this profession, but, I mean, in any profession, a lot of different things, those professions can change you in a certain way.
Mhm.
And with this one, you end up going through that. Did you feel that, especially with this call, and maybe you felt this way with other calls as well, but because this one was so significant, do you feel like when you started talking about it more that there was kind of some therapeutic relief there?
Yes, absolutely. So, funny story is when you I was looking at your book the other day, the I Am 911 book,
Mhm.
and way back in the day, I wanted to talk about it. So I submitted to you my I Am 911 story. And that's how me and my manager started talking about your podcast, is because I found my story in your book, which was wild to me. So,
Uh, so with that story, yes, and I think we were talking about it as well. For those who are watching and listening, if you have the Imagine Listening book, it is page number 72. And when your manager was telling me about that, at first I thought she was joking, and then she was giving me more detail, and I thought, okay, no, this is real. I said, you really you work with this person? And she goes, yeah. And she had mentioned that she was going to talk to you about being on, possibly to share your story. And I thought that would be amazing to do that, and to have you on and to share this story, and the fact that it's in this book as well, for people that when I founded the I Am 911 movement and people were sharing story after story after story, it was a moment where it was like the thin gold line from around the world came together, sharing these stories for what started out as a way to raise awareness for reclassification. It quickly turned into peer support because a lot of people started realizing they were not alone,
yep.
and they finally had a way to share some of these stories that they couldn't share out loud. They were able to do it anonymously, and it was therapeutic. And
Mhm.
thank you for what you do, but also for submitting this story and sharing it for anyone else out there who can learn from your experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's it's something with these calls that, in a way can bring us all together. And as you mentioned as well, that it was therapeutic to share some of these stories when you were training still, and maybe even now, even not as a trainer, but someone who might talk to you about something similar, whether it be this call that we were just talking about or any other call, do you find, also for those who are asking you questions, that part of the communication, those that power of storytelling that really just kind of helps some of those folks that are reaching out to you?
Absolutely. And I think it's important to have people retell. So after they hang up on a critical call, to kind of retell us, hey, this just happened. That way it's not just sitting with them. They've given it to us. We can help carry that. We can do our check ins, make sure that they're doing okay. And then we can also alert, our leadership or our supervisors or management to kind of keep an eye out for that, because if they're not getting that taken care of, that compounding stress is what's hurtful, I think.
So for you, when you were still kind of going through all of this, and then all of this time afterwards, um, do you ever find some of those moments, like even like trigger moments, where you kind of go back and you think about the call, but maybe it doesn't impact you the same way because you've
Mhm.
been able to talk about it? But I guess what I'm getting at is, because even me being out 11 years, there's still some things that I see or hear that will kind of trigger certain things, and I have to just kind of sit with it a moment and just, all right, I'm good. Just
Mhm.
kind of take it in, allow myself to feel, because I think that's one of the big things is that a lot of us, we don't allow ourselves to actually feel, and we just bury it.
Yep.
Would you agree?
Yes. 100%.
So with that, anybody who might be dealing with a similar situation, let's just say just basically a hard call.
Mhm.
What is some of the what would you say to them if they're thinking about, kind of reaching out to somebody or, taking that first step and just kind of sharing their story?
I would say do it in a heartbeat. It's not only going to help you, but it's also going to set a foundation for the person sitting next to you to know that it's okay to not be okay. Because we have to be so tough in this career to even get through a day without being affected. And if we're not recognizing that it's hard or stressful, then it's going to be taken out on our families, on our sleep, on substance abuse, on many different things. So I say, open up, talk about it, and then let your friends know, because then that'll empower them to, when they're going through it, that they feel safe reaching out to you.
That is excellent. Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much
Mhm.
for that. And one of the things too that I mentioned, just a couple things as we're going into the wrap up of this episode. I always tell people that if they have not started journaling or writing down some of their wins, that they should. And the reason I say that too is because anything can happen in 911. And when you're having one of those hard shifts, when you're having one of those hard days, when you've taken hard call after hard call after hard call, you can look back at some of those wins and feel good about everything that you're doing and remembering why you do what it is that you do. So for you, what are some of more of those rewarding moments?
Um, so I love baby calls, like give having a baby.
Mhm.
I helped a dad deliver a baby in a Starbucks parking lot, and as I was explaining to tie the shoelace around the umbilical cord, um, I didn't think much about it, but the firefighter called me and said, when we arrived, the dad handed me the baby with a boot on his chest because he didn't take the shoelace out of his
Oh,
boot, right? And so it's just little things like that that I was able to help, hear the first cry. Um, that one was a big win for me. I love that story just because the dad's so cute, you know, and and going through his own stress at that time. And then I love when an officer reaches out and says thank you. So those are my little wins. If I can get, hey, you did great. All that information was excellent. Because of something you did, it created a safer foundation for us to respond. To me, when an officer says thank you, that's a huge win for me. So that's what I look forward to.
ah, that is great. I love that. And it has been amazing to have you on this episode and meet you and hear your story and learn more about you. Thank you so much for everything that you do, but also for being a guest today.
Oh, you are very welcome. Thank you for having me.
It has been an honor to have you on. And I've got one last question for you. So you're going on these 16 years
Mhm.
of your public safety career and all. And if you could go back in time with all of the knowledge that you have now to talk to yourself in the beginning, what advice would you give yourself?
Whew. Hmm. I guess I would say never stop learning and always do your best, regardless of, so that way you did your best regardless of the outcome. Maybe. Hmm. And don't drink too much wine.
Hey, that's good. That's good advice, man. Yeah, no, that's good because I've had these. I always ask this question at the end because I'd like to hear what people would say to themselves in the beginning. I had, um, I had someone ask me once, would you ever change anything? And I always say no. Like I would give myself advice, but I wouldn't change anything because
Yeah.
everything that I went through made me who I am today.
Hmm.
So it's good to go back or think about, if you could go back and give yourself some advice, sure. Give yourself some advice. But me personally, I wouldn't change anything because it
Yeah.
led to everything that I'm doing now. So again, thank you for being on. This has been awesome. And we could have, I could have worked with you, man, because it would have been awesome to work with you.
Yeah.
And
Fun.
I could talk to you for hours. Yeah. This has been excellent. Again, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
I'm going to be back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, so if you are new to dispatch, if you are a seasoned dispatcher or retired and you would like to come on and share your story, please do so. I would love to share your story. I have been sharing dispatch stories, powerful dispatch stories, for over a decade now. And it's my passion. It's my love. I love doing this and sharing these important stories to get out there so that people understand more what it is that you do, but more importantly, why it is that you do it. So you can reach out to me, whether it be on email within the trenches at withinthetrenches.net. You can go there, or wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. But to make it easier for anyone who's trying to reach out or wants to be a guest, you can simply go to links.co/WTT podcast. And that's links with 2 I's, .co/WTT podcast. You'll find everything there. Email, all of my social media, where to follow, and you can listen to the latest episode on there. And then right underneath that is a button that says schedule an episode. And you can go through that. You can also find where to buy the book, the audio book, and pre-order book number 2 that is going to be coming out in August of this year. Book 2 of Imagine Listening, Your Worst Days Are Every Day, will be coming out. So make sure to pre-order that now so that you can get it as soon as it comes out. A big thanks to InDigital, the leader Next Gen Core Services, for being a podcast network sponsor. And then, of course, Prepared as well for being a Social Media Plus sponsor for the month of March. Make sure to listen to the beginning of the episode. And then, of course, here in a little bit for more information on Prepared. But you can simply go to prepared901.com to find out more about what it is that they do and why they do it. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as X and LinkedIn Live. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you all in the next one. How often has a caller given you a description of a situation that turned out to be completely incorrect? How about a description of a suspicious individual that had only vague details? Or a fire that was supposed to be the next big wildfire, but turned out to just be a campfire for some s'mores? To help these moments become a thing of the past, you need Prepared Assist. Prepared Assist gives you the ability to receive live video and picture directly from the caller in real time. You can see that the situation they described as a big fight is just 2 people yelling. You can see that the suspicious individual they described as a short female with a red t-shirt is actually a male with a green sweatshirt. You can see exactly how bad the fire is and help prepare the engines en route with a better size up than ever before. And if you don't like the video that's coming in, you can blur it at any time, even before the live stream starts. And it can still be stored for use in after action and past the field responders. Sometimes you won't need live video at all, like when a person is reported missing. Instead of waiting for the officer to get to the scene to collect the picture, you can get one from the caller instantly, saving crucial time at the start of the search. Prepared Assist is built to give you situational clarity so that you can get to the truth of the call faster than ever before. Visit prepared911.com/assist to learn more and see the platform in action.